Now, Shep and Mellon have been very kind to us. They've actually sponsored and hosted our events for almost 3 years. And Colleen McDonald, is going to give a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Just want to welcome everyone here tonight. We're delighted to be able to host and to get involved in these panels with Pamela. They're really exciting for us. And on behalf of my 900 colleagues that are all attorneys at Shepard Mullen, we welcome you and hope you enjoy the presentation tonight. I am in the structured finance area, securitization, so my FinTech is more on the fin than the tech. But I'm always delighted to get educated on some of these great topics that they have. And anybody who wants to talk fin, I'm happy to do that at any time. So welcome, thank you.
Thanks, Colleen. So I actually had the day I started arranging this panel, I was hacked for the first time on my SIM that night. And within less than 2 weeks, I was hacked again. I didn't lose anything. I was very lucky, but I know that there are other stories. So I'm going to pass it on to Bob, and he's going to moderate the panel and introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Well, hi everybody. My name's Bob Boyd. Is this good enough? Okay, so I'm Bob Boyd. I work for a company called Telegraph Hill Software. If that sounds vaguely familiar, interesting, let me know afterwards. So tonight I'm kind of the referee. I'll try to keep time, and I'll break it up into 3 chunks. Where are we? Where are we going? And how do we get to someplace better? And ask these fine panelists who know a lot about this a few questions. So let's start with where are we? And I talked to Guido earlier about giving a short introduction to what's the vulnerability, what's the exploit. Can you explain to somebody like my wife, the opera singer, non-technical person, what's going on here?
All right, so I'll try to explain it like I'm 5 of SIM swapping here. You'll be the judge if that works. So you may have seen, if you log into a website, right? The website asks you for a phone number, and if you ever want to do something like, for example, resetting your password, or you log in for the first time from your computer, it'll ask you to verify that it's really you by sending you an SMS with a code to your phone, right? And there, maybe instead they use a phone call that they send you a phone, but they'll do something basically with your phone to verify that you actually own that phone number that you initially specified. And you can argue that's definitely better than nothing, right? I mean, just using a password and trusting it from wherever it is means I can just guess it, and there's an additional step here that makes it a little bit more secure. Now, the problem with this is that if I can steal your phone, then obviously I can, now reset your password, right? Because I steal your phone, I trigger the SMS, I read the SMS on your phone, and I can now change the password from you on that particular website. Now, it turns out you don't actually have to steal the phone. You can do it much easier. If I can manage to get a SIM card for your account, then I can basically do the same thing with any phone, right? Because now my phone becomes tied to your account, so all the SMS that previously went to you now go to me. And the simple idea of a SIM swap is to do exactly that. So all I need to do is, let's say you're with AT&T, you need to find one AT&T employee or a retail chain that's affiliated with AT&T that sells AT&T phones that has the authority to order a new SIM card or issue a new SIM card. And if I can find one person who's willing to do this for me, then I can take over your account, right? And I can do this by tricking that person. Maybe I can bring in a fake social security number. Maybe I can whine and beg and tell a story about my dead grandma or something like that, right? Maybe I can just pay somebody off. Maybe I just actually have an employee that's in there and that does this wholesale with a bunch of them. Or maybe I hack into one of these terminals and do that remotely. But basically what we're doing is we're reducing the security of your online account to the security of a large telephone carrier, and the ability of anyone to basically obtain a SIM card in your name.
Great.
That make sense?
And after you've done that, what kind of car can you buy?
Yeah, so it was a recent story. There was this 19-year-old kid in Santa Clara that did exactly that. Not very sophisticated, just a little bit of social engineering. Basically, SIM swapped a couple of folks in the Bitcoin industry actually had all the Bitcoin accounts, sold that, and bought himself a McLaren sports car, and I think
$250,000.
something like that. Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean,
He was trying to remain inconspicuous.
very low profile. Really, I don't know how they got him. I think a helicopter trip to Coachella or something like that. So we're seeing that really people that have very little technical background are doing this, and then we're seeing sort of well-organized groups doing this at scale. With a lot of technical sophistication.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
And you can add or?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I would also say to think about here is, I feel the way this played out is we thought it was a good idea to give tens of thousands of people the ability to port, around our phone numbers because there was a history of lock-in with carriers. And so our response to that was saying, okay, why don't we lock into my carrier? I want to be able to move carriers whenever I want in case they spike up my rates. So we, lobbied for making it really easy to port phone numbers, and that played out as expected. But now we have all of these different people, all these different retail chains who can port your number. And so we built a security model that expects all of them to be honest. And any security model that expects thousands of people to all be honest is flawed. And so a bunch of articles actually came out this morning from the Department of Justice showing that there's this, with AT&T, there was a large bribing ring, actually bribing a lot of AT&T employees to install malware on their networks. And the first one may say no, the second one may say no. You see one of them to say yes, and then everybody's phones are vulnerable.
And this isn't just a crypto thing, right? I mean, there are other populations, other profiles that would, this isn't just a hack that's will be able to drain a crypto account.
Yeah, I actually talked to my bank and said, hey, is there anything other than my phone number at the end of the day that is required, my phone number, social security number, that's required to drain my account? And they made excuse here, excuse there, but as I keep repeating the question, they finally had to say, well, yeah, that's what it goes down to. It's just not a great answer.
Right. And Michael, you've had a lot of experience with the carriers. What's the situation with the carriers now? I mean, this is a problem that's not new. It's at least years old.
Yeah, it's at least 5 or 6 years old. It's been accelerating, and they are burying their heads in the sand. They are just doubling down on denial, and their response to my lawsuit when I got hacked. Well, I got hacked the first time after employing quite a bit of security. I've been in the industry since 2013, so I've got Trezors, I got Ledgers, all of my accounts that are custodial accounts have Google 2FA. I don't keep very much in them. I keep them mainly in offline storage. But I'm in the industry. I'm an advisor to a number of companies, and we've done PR Transform Group, advisory services for over 150 companies. And there's some tokens that you have to keep in staking wallets, and then you have to just simply password protect them. And there are ways that very sophisticated hackers can go and get to those files through different hacks of completely non-crypto software. And they wouldn't get access to even start, monkeying around and try to figure out how to hack into the cloud or hack into, shrink wrap software that might be able to go and find a fragment of what you've created. Because I've got all the anti-malware, I've got all the anti-key logging and all that. Unless they were able to get access to my digital life. And the first time that I got hacked, only lost half a Bitcoin, but they then took over my Skype and conned other people out of 13 Bitcoin. They almost got caught because they tried to go to a contact of mine of a client, because we were representing Zcoin at the time, and they thought that they wanted to turn all their Bitcoin into Zcoin because it was more anonymous. And the guy emailed me and said, hey, I think somebody's trying to impersonate you, and I didn't see that email because I was up all night trying to change accounts, and he just replied to something, so it wasn't a new email. If I had seen it, I would have said, tell him you can do it, and then say I'm now sending the money to the real Michael Turpin.
Right.
But that didn't happen, so I did end up losing half a Bitcoin, and people that I know lost 13 and a half, and I had to go on other social media until Microsoft was able to give me back my Skype. I then went to Microsoft and said, I want to separate all of my Skype, my LinkedIn, all this. And they said, no, for your convenience, we won't let you separate them. I said, for my security, I'd like you to, because Microsoft, and this is not unique to software, they feel that Google's a competitor, so they will not let you put Google 2FA on any Microsoft software. They have something called Microsoft Authenticator, which doesn't work. It works for maybe a week or two, and then it uninstalls itself or gets a bug and it doesn't work. Just Google to see how many times it doesn't work. And so there's a number of vulnerabilities like this, which is why the solution, I shouldn't say solutions yet, or, I mean, in my opinion, the solution, first and foremost, is you have to cover the password. Those thousands of people that you have to trust, make a law, FCC probably is the one to do it, that basically says, among other things, you know, you can't see these passwords. You have to have a pass-fail like a bank. You can't go into your bank and tell the teller, hey, I forgot my PIN, can you look it up?
Right.
And same thing with most passwords, they're pass-fail. You put it into your keypad, airlines, hotel chains, and it's pass-fail. And if not, you say, oh, if you forgot your password, you better call the fraud department.
Right.
And that's not the case because exactly what you said, because they wanted to make it easy to port so they can install when you're trying to change things. But, you know, I think that having you remember your password is not much of a extra factor. That would literally shut this thing down immediately, and they know that, and they're being unconscionable and not implementing it.
All right. Well, so that's kind of where are we at the moment. Anybody have a question about the current state of affairs?
So what happens when there are two SIM cards that belong to one person when they're in the field, right? Because somebody issues a SIM card, but you still have your SIM card. So now there are two SIM cards with your phone number?
No, it moves from one to the other.
Usually the old one gets switched off.
Okay, so the other one's off.
So if you suddenly lose cellular reception or even data connectivity usually happens first
Right.
on your phone. Bad sign.
And everybody in here, since you're on the list of people who go to crypto-related conferences and talks, keep an eye on your phone during the call, just in case anybody drops off the network. We'll know.
So I have Google Fi specifically because it's a SIM-less phone. How come everyone in crypto doesn't have a SIM-less phone?
SIM-less still has to meet requirements of being able to port a phone number. So you're not actually physically moving a SIM from one phone to the other anyway. What's happening is they're giving your phone number from one carrier to another carrier, almost like changing ownership on a domain name.
There are no stores. There's no idiot and minimum wage guy at a T-Mobile store. You have to hack my Google account to move my number, and it's hard to hack the Google account.
Not necessarily. It really depends on how it's structured, because ultimately number porting requests have to be honored by law, and if they're placed and set up in the right way from the right entry points, they're going to be honored. I would say that of the carriers that I've looked at, Fi is not as susceptible, but there's still a lot of evidence that Fi numbers are being ported just like everything else, because they all kind of share the same rules.
Is there a way to?
I'm sorry, I was just going to answer that. There are other ways also. First of all, how many people here have AT&T as a carrier? Get off of it in the morning, in my opinion, because they're the only ones that don't let you have a lockdown. The other ones let you actually go and lock it down. So at least that means that if somebody comes in, they're like, oh, sorry, you have to hand me your old SIM and we'll give you the new SIM. Otherwise, you got to go to the fraud department. AT&T is the only one that basically makes it really easy for these people to get bribed. T-Mobile is better in that you can request SIM lockdown, and the other thing also, they have a pretty tricked program which is called Digits. It's $10 a month. It's SIM-less, and it lets you take your old phone that basically has your number that everybody thinks they're going to hack and make it virtual and forward it to your new phone number on T-Mobile, and your new phone number, you never put data on it. And by getting a new number, you can remember if you ever put data on it. Started today, I never put data on it. And that seems to be pretty foolproof.
Say that one more time. How does it work?
So, and again, I'm not aware of anybody else who has the program, but T-Mobile is what I recommend to people if they want to stay with a carrier. The other thing is pretty foolproof is Cricket. You just simply have a plan it's a burner phone. Basically, you have to go into a place and pay by cash whenever you want to re-up your minutes. I mean, I know a number of people who had Cricket phones for their who were like old time Bitcoiners who had Cricket forever just because they were digital nomads. They couldn't get a phone because they were like, kind of didn't have the same address or something time, or they didn't have a lot of reportable income or whatever. The second all of a sudden they got a good job and they went and got AT&T, boom, they got hacked. And Cricket is really good. It's just a little inconvenient for people to go and say you have to go and, oh, I'm out of minutes, I gotta go and buy a new card. But Digits, D-I-G-I-T-S, is a T-Mobile product. It's an app. And what you do is you have to go and get a new T-Mobile account. And you get it with a number that basically is just your friends and family number. You never, ever, ever use it for 2FA. You then put it on SIM lockdown. And then you sign up for the digits using a address that you're not particularly, known for, and ideally a name and a phone number, maybe that's not associated with you if you really want to be completely tinfoil about it. And then you forward the number that people would be trying to hack, the one that's associated with you, and that they've tried to hack before, or they did hack before, and that then forwards into your phone, and it's seamless. In fact, you can actually reply from that number, both by text and by, I use it, it's a good product.
This is a virtual number.
It's a virtual number, $10 a month, can't be SIM swapped because there is no SIM, can't be ported because you've already ported it, and you ported it and into something that basically has a SIM lock, and it's a non-SIM number.
As a very simple option, fronting yourself with a Google Voice number also seems to help a little bit, just because, again, there's no SIM, you have to port it somewhere else, which is harder.
There are certain things that Google Voice will not let you use as authentication. And Rob, were you the one telling me that there were some exploits on Google Voice, or somebody else?
I did, yeah.
Rob Ross, by the way, is the head of StopSimCrime.org.
Yes, Michael and I have a lot in common. Well, we have one thing in common, which is our hacker. So I was SIM swapped as well. The Google exploit is, so Gmail is susceptible to a phishing attack. So if someone takes over your Gmail, it happens, they can then take over your Google.
Obviously, any Gmail, particularly the one that you have any crypto information or any, I just blanket all your Gmail, even if you think that you've never told anybody about it, there are hacker tools that are reverse lookup from your number, and you have to put Google 2FA on every single Gmail account and remove hints, remove everything except Google 2FA.
I completely agree with that. And putting strong 2FA, ideally security key, right, or at least something similar, on your Google account, on your wife's Google account, my kids, your security keys is one of the strongest things you can do, because that basically, now we're getting a little into what can we do about it, right?
Yeah.
So, I fundamentally think that ultimately, this is a battle we can't win, right? Neither AT&T nor T-Mobile nor any of these guys is really set up to provide the necessary level of security of the most security sensitive user of your website. Right? That's not what they're set up for, right? They cater to the masses, they want a fairly seamless process, and so if you're suddenly trying to secure large amounts of Bitcoin, and this is the weakest link, I don't think this can possibly work.
And in my opinion, they created the problem themselves by actively going to software companies and saying, hey, you want more security? Use the SMS as backup. When it was, I would have been much more secure without an SMS backup.
That was a really stupid idea. No? So basically, I think we have to move away from that. Today, if a website uses SMS or phone calls for two-factor authentication, this website is doing something wrong, right? And it's actually interesting. The European regulator just reacted and is now specifically disallowing SMS or phone-based two-factor for certain types of transactions, which is a very interesting new trend. So I'll get you in a second. And if you look at, for example, at Google, right? Google about 6 months ago, I want to say, they allow you to turn off SMS and phone-based account recovery. So you can go in there and say, the only thing I want to allow is, two-factor using a hardware dongle, for example, like a hardware key, right? Which is incredibly secure. If you look at the Google research, actually published some really good data where they're comparing different ways of authentication. and how they do in against different types of attacks. So they took lots of attacks. They wholesale phishing. They just blanket. The more targeted phishing that maybe has the right company header or so, and then there's the spear phishing. It's this email from your boss on a Friday, referencing transaction you know about. I immediately due to do XYZ, right? So and if you look at them, still across 360,000 accounts, they had zero compromises if they used like two-factor authentication.
So that's kind of where we're on to where are we going, and that's a pretty good example. Lance, you want to chime in with what is it getting better or worse? I mean, I guess that's one question. I on the way over here read a BBC article about North Korea making $1.6 billion on stolen cryptocurrency, and that being one of the major sources of income for their recent. So how is it getting better or worse? Can you really protect against an organized state actor?
I think that you absolutely can, but not with the tactics and methods that we're using today. The capabilities are here, and the tactics that we're using to protect ourselves are way down here. And even when we think about approaching like a symptomatic thing, like, okay, how do I protect my number from being ported? This is a good question to ask. But we also have to ask, once we stop that problem, what's the next attack if we're still using SMS? You can actually buy $20 devices on Amazon right now called RTL SDRs. You can plug it in, and in the United States it's required that you can downgrade text message communications down to 2G. That means that you effectively can force someone's text messages to be sent in plain text. Now, it is technically encrypted, but the tools to decrypt it are less than $100. So that just means that, okay, we made that attack a little bit harder. Now we're going to move on to the next thesis attack. We need to be a few steps ahead here. And we have a lot more thoughts on solutions, but I don't think it's going to get better until we're willing to change our habits, and the need to say, I'm used to using SMS and I have to have SMS be reliable. We have to start pushing back on that completely to other methods.
Yeah, today is about talking about SMS, which again is over 1 billion, probably 2 or 3 billion. But that 1.6 billion for Korea number includes just other types of hacks that are not SMS enabled. MailChimp hacks and parody hacks, and there's a number of different exploits. But the low hanging fruit for these organized crime gangs like the OG users, which are teenagers and young adults that I call them valedictorians gone bad. I mean, they're basically the mafia except of crypto, and they met each other playing video games and then kind of graduated from playing GTA to doing real grand theft. And I think that they will continue to go and work on any exploit they can until they're put in jail, which obviously that's a big thing too. But as long as it's this easy to go and hack, you put 100 of them in jail and 1,000 more will pop up because it's easy money until you get caught.
One of the things also that I think is contributing to the challenge, I mean, certainly you mentioned before the kind of convenience factor of being able to port the numbers, but in my attack, one thing that I noticed, so first of all, I used a authenticator called Authy. Does anybody use or have Authy? One? Okay. It's like Google Authenticator, but it's a different kind of thing. Authy actually uses SMS for its recovery or for installing a new phone. And I had in Authy, there's a little toggle switch that says allow multi-device. And because I had that toggle switch, it was $1 million toggle switch for me. And when I was talking with Coinbase fraud and Gemini fraud, the fraud departments, they have actually spoken with Authy about not having the this off by default, or rather not having it turn off by default, because it would provide too much friction for the customer. So I think one of the things that's happening is this whole battle between ease of use and friction with security, because how many people is it really impacting? It's starting to impact a lot more people, but one of the big problems I see is that it's not like you have the Coinbase, Gemini, AT&T, Verizon consortium to combat SIM swapping, they're just kind of all doing their own thing and they're passing it off to each other. And so, it's kind of a problem that nobody's really saying that they want to own.
So what's if it's not really getting better because the bad actors have more and more exploits, what's the path? What's a good path from here? I mean, do we all have to get so sophisticated, even more sophisticated than the people in this room individually? Is that the only way we're gonna be able to knock this down a little bit?
So my impression is right now, actually, we're not actually trying. I mean, so as a website, you still have SMS-based account recovery or what Authy is doing there. I'm sorry, this is today it's no longer best of breed. Like when I'm trying to anticipate where are we going overall as an industry, I usually look at the big tech companies first because they typically have the highest pain points and so often are the best in innovating. Right? If you look at what pick any, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, what these guys are doing, they all have deployed hardware tokens at scale at this point. Right? So the little, not sure if everybody's seen these little USB tokens like this.
Got you here.
There we go. Perfect. So you can basically, these things cost $20 or so, including shipping. Basically, they generate a key on them, and they're basically unclonable, right? Which is kind of a nice property, right? They're tamper resistant, so basically you plug them to your computer, you touch a contact, and they can authenticate you to a site. If you lose them, it's gone, right? But at least nobody can copy this thing, and certainly nobody can copy this thing remotely. Right? It's a very simple but very powerful property, because that means if this is the only authenticator that you've enrolled, then somebody remotely taking over your account is not possible. Right? And typically, you probably want to enroll 2 or 3 in case you lose one, right? Otherwise, it's a very close. So if you start at a large tech company today, there's a good chance that in day one they'll give you one of those or 2 of those, right? 2, so you never call the call center. Just if you lose one, you can just grab a new one from the fishbowl. The price points of these things are getting low enough that I think in the future many people will use them. Right? The other part of the equation is actually we're starting to see some new standards, so you may not even need a hardware dongle anymore. There's if you look at the latest authentication standards, there's WebAuthn and FIDO2. Right? Before there was U2F and FIDO. So these are standards that basically allow you to enroll a similar chip as it is in these little hardware tokens that's inside your phone for authentication. So basically you can go to a site, you can say, I want to register this phone as a trusted device. They say, okay, apply your fingerprint, generates a little key in a secure enclave, and then basically uses that key in the future to authenticate that phone. And again, it's basically now impossible to clone that authenticator from that phone, or almost impossible. And it's definitely very, very difficult to do that remotely. So now you have created a trusted device that can make a huge step forward.
So which of these, however, stop bribery? In other words, if you've got this on your machine and somebody goes in and AT&T won't let you have SIM lockdown, and they say you're you and the person who's been bribed does it, and he turns off your device, do any of these dongles stop the device from being turned off and switched over to a new phone?
So if you can bribe AT&T and basically saying, ignore that device, take another device as yours, obviously no, right?
Yeah, that's what happens in the majority of the cases.
That said, I currently, for every single site where it's possible to turn off SMS or phone-based reset, I've turned it off, right? And you should. It should not be active anywhere. This is just, I think, today, bad hygiene if you're still using that. If you use that, then yes, your phone got compromised. It's really annoying. You have to run after AT&T or T-Mobile or pick your favorite carrier, right, to get this thing back. But at the same time, your, whatever, Binance or Coinbase accounts are still safe because there you'll register with a security token, and them having your phone number actually doesn't help them at all, right? Your Gmail account is still safe. All the other accounts that you have are now unaffected from somebody having compromised your phone.
And that's because you've generated some kind of token on the phone, but it's not associated with the SIM.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and Google 2FA does largely the same thing. And the one thing also for those of you using Google 2FA, don't put it on the same phone that you use for every day. Because if you lose that phone, then you're screwed. Put it on the best practices, get an Android tablet and just put it in a safe. And one without a phone on it, just like a Wi-Fi tablet, put it in a safe and make sure every time you do it, you put down the recovery key, because if that device dies, you have to go in and use that recovery key to put it on a new device. If you lose that, then you have to actually go to the service and prove you're you.
So can I get, Google's with you mean the Google Authenticator?
Google Authenticator, yes.
I want to get on one more soapbox here and say, I don't think that's the right solution either. And the Google Authenticator has many really good properties, right? I mean, it's not guessable, it gets stored in secure enclave, that's all good. It still has one problem, which is that it's phishable, right?
Sorry.
It's phishable. Right? So basically, I set up a fake google.com, right? I get you to go to fakegoogle.com, type in your number. I immediately use that with realgoogle.com, and I'm in your account. Does that make sense?
Well, typically it's not fake Google, it's fake Binance or fake wherever you end up putting it.
Exactly, but basically, I can capture what you type in, I can send it to the real site, and I can now log into the real site. And this may seem, you may wonder like, okay, how easy is this, right? Building a system that in real time captures this and then logs into another site. Turns out there's great software packages today, a couple of Docker containers, with a Kubernetes file that basically has both the fake website plus a headless Chrome instance that does the login afterwards, right? So all fully automated.
And aren't
You can download the internet.
Aren't those typically caught by just a hygiene, like looking to make sure that it's got its certificates and running proper malware?
Doesn't help, right? I mean, if I can trick you going to the wrong site and typing in that code, I'm in your account. So
Right, but you didn't answer my question.
Oh.
I mean, if you know how to see a fake account, like when you go in, you actually bookmark the real account. You make sure that it has an accurate certificate.
all that helps. It can be really difficult, right? I mean, these things are spelled similarly. Honestly, some of these sites use brain dead names sometimes. I worked in a large company that shall remain unnamed, where, suddenly for login, I was to redirect to something like PPP-2. So I called,
So now
that's legitimate.
Now we're talking about spoofing, which is a huge problem as well. I mean, for example, if you're on Telegram, I mean, I've got, well, actually, Reese sent me someone who basically created a fake Michael Turpin account and tried to sell mining investments. And of course, we've known each other for a number of years, and just the way that the guy talked, you kind of knew that it wasn't me. It's like, I think it said, "Do you like my content?" Yes. "Would you like to hear of an investment?" Sure. And then it's like, make 30% per day or whatever it is. And like, pay me. It's like, I think you're being spoofed. And the best one I ever saw, by the way, if you have a name that has, first of all, in every social network you can get sort of, kind of authenticated ones, get them verified accounts. But the best one I saw, because I've had several people on Telegram, pretend to be me and be at Michael Turpin11 or whatever. I'm just at Michael Turpin on every social media. And somebody actually someone said, hey, somebody was just trying to get Bitcoin from me, they've taken over your Telegram account. I said, no, there's a spoofer. He goes, no, look at it, it's at Michael Turpin. He's like, it was at Mike with a number 1 instead of an L. Ooh, really good. So if you have an L in your name, make sure you get that one and don't use it for anything.
One thing I would add to this is, so I have done a lot of phishing and security research, and also for companies and whatnot, and I found that I can consistently phish even security researchers, CTOs, etc., who are good at this stuff. Because you catch them early in the morning, and you catch them with just the right hook, something financial. Hey, did you expect this transaction? Click here to find out, right? You tailor to them just right, you get an emotional hook, and they will fly right past it. And then it's just, oh look, a password prompt and a prompt to put in your Google 2FA, and you'll just do it. If you think it's important, you think it's urgent. And so we can't even really trust ourselves fully to do it right 100% of the time, so we have to have a tool that'll let us do that. One other addition to Google Authenticator, I've actually audited the code for both iOS and Android. And both of these, it actually just stores an SQLite text file. It does not use a secure enclave, because a secure enclave on most phones does not actually support the TOTP algorithm required. So in short, if your phone has any exploits on it at all that allow other apps to read the files of other apps, which is very common in both iOS and Android, they can take your 2FA token master seed and use it all day long to generate codes. So this is also a dead-end method, and Google, who helped promote this, is also seeing this as a dead-end method promoting hardware tokens now.
Another reason to put it on a different device.
Yeah. So one last thing on the point of phishing here, right? I think any good authentication mechanism in the future needs to be phishing proof, right? And because, again, I think you're completely right? You can probably trick me if you try hard enough. Google Research actually has some really interesting data on, I think of all the accounts that were attacked with highly specialized phishing attacks, they said about 20% or so, were compromised if they use something like Google Authenticator. Right, so 80% protection is not bad, but still 20% breach is pretty bad, right? So there are modern protocols today, like WebAuthn, that actually are effectively phishing proof. And let me explain how this works, because it's actually pretty clever. So basically, if you use like a security key, or you can actually do it with the biometrics and the secure element as well on devices. But basically, if you communicate with a web server, so basically the first time you enroll, for example, on my security key, will generate a private key that only I know, right? And I can use this, for example, to sign things. And this happens automatically. The user doesn't see it. You just plug this thing in, new website, enroll, okay. Right? Now, if I go to that website again to authenticate, the website will basically, my browser will take the domain name of that website, and then we create basically a digital signature over a challenge plus the domain name of that website. A little technical here, but bear with me. So think about how this works with a phishing site. He is redirecting me to fakebinance.com or something like that, for him to type in and I'm using my authenticator. It now takes from the web browser fakebinance.com plus the challenge, signs that, and sends it back. So he now has a valid authenticator for fakebinance.com. The problem is he can't use that for real Binance, right? Because the domain name is stuck in there. If he presents it to real Binance is like fakebinance.com. That's certainly not an authenticator I would accept, right? So we're basically having support in the browser to take the domain name as part of the security handshake. This redirecting to another site doesn't work anymore. And that's a huge step forward, right, by basically taking that out of the equation.
It was mentioned a little bit earlier about key logging. So we're talking about taking an iPad, putting inside a locker, the safe deposit box, but then we take that code and we plug it in, and sure enough, we get key logged. So how do you address that?
So I actually, at some of the firms I work with, I've used keyloggers in the wild many times, and I've had people use them on me, and ultimately it comes down to designing it to where if you had a keylogger, it wouldn't matter. In my case, since in order to access servers or sensitive things or whatnot, because I'm using a hardware token, before I can actually access any of these sensitive services, this token is going to physically start blinking, and I need to be there to physically touch it. So you can keylog me all day long, and you'll see me ranting about various things on the internet, but you won't actually get the token required to do this sort of handshake in order to be able to do authorization. This is very powerful. It means as long as I have this physical thing with me, I can be confident that nobody's going to take my accounts away.
There's some pretty good
Anti-key logging software, Savannah, for example, is very good. And I think you can put out like 3 or 4 computers for like $100 a year or something, and it catches stuff. I mean, it's more anti-malware that it catches, because I don't think I've actually ever been knowingly key logged, but it does say you're safe for being key logged every day when you put it up.
There is some software that does make some of these claims, and I don't know the one specifically that they're talking about. But the keyloggers, a lot of the ones that are being deployed right now, especially when there's high-value targets. One of them was deployed on the Apple wireless keyboard. You could just do a drive-by attack, do a pair with it, install software, special firmware on the keyboard itself that will make the keyboard itself keylog you. And then later you can come out and pick up those keystrokes. This is not going to be detectable by software on the computer because software is not running on the computer. Likewise, you can bribe someone in the cleaning crew to say, hey, plug in this special USB cable. I've actually got some in my bag.
They look like real USB cables. They're undetectable.
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yes, I actually have some. Every time somebody feels like something is wrong or organizations to work with, they'll bring up cables. This is one of your special cables because they look absolutely identical. You cannot tell them apart from regular cables. You can swap out the whole keyboard or a cable. There are digital methods that are very hard to detect as well, but physical methods are even harder. So once again, I think we just have to anticipate. Just assume that everything is being keylogged and say, if that's true, am I still protected? And if the answer is no, then you might want to reach one of these other methods.
So we've talked about phishing and keylogging, and what are the other couple of, just to summarize before we run out of our 45 minutes. phishing, key logging, and what are the other attack vectors that you want to protect against? And I think, if I've understood correctly, that the hardware token, the YubiKey or whatever hardware token you want to use, would protect against all of those other attack vectors. Am I getting the right idea?
I would say they protect against most classes of attack, at least most of the popular classes of attack, and it is dramatically better than any other option that users can easily reach for today. I'm a big fan of YubiKeys, also use treasures and ledgers for other specific use cases where you need to screen on the device, but there's a lot of great devices in the market to help with this sort of thing. And the number one, I've helped deploy these at a few organizations, and always the big fear is, but that's complicated, that sounds hard, that sounds difficult to use. But we already carry around these secure enclave things on our credit cards all the time. And they have a actual secure enclave device on it. I won't say a very good one, but it is one. And you put in a PIN number and you use it. So something you have plus a PIN number or a touch or something like this. We're already used to this. So we just translate that same thing to our online activities. We're going to have dramatically better security.
I think one other thing we're slowly starting to tackle is how we deal with mobile applications, right? Because they run into many of the same problems. So this thing is actually not available yet, but we've announced this. This is a Lightning YubiKey, right? So you can actually use the same, one side USB-C, use that for your MacBook, right? The other one, Lightning to use with your phone. So you can use the same hardware token for both your mobile transactions and your computer transactions.
Yeah, and on that note, I'll shamelessly plug your product since it's not as appropriate.
Thank you. Sorry about
that. So another product we offer, in addition to Google Authenticators, I was just saying, stores it in plain text, there's a product called Yubico Authenticators. So for those services that don't support hardware tokens directly and say we only support Google Authenticator, it's a drop-in replacement. You install the app, and so to get my codes, I just tap my key to the back of the phone, and my phone is just acting as effectively a screen for those codes. And so once again, this means that the secret isn't living on my phone, and so if there's a malware in the phone, it can't actually take that secret and generate codes free for all. This is still not anywhere near as great as something like WebAuthn, but as a stopgap, it's great.
So is that what you would recommend? Your bank, right? Is that what you would recommend? You say all users in order to use mobile banking now have to have one of these physical hardware keys, and if you would conjecture if you think that makes sense from like the consumer's perspective.
I know for organizations that I've advised, I've I told them, and in some cases they've actually done it and said, these customers that aren't willing to move to one of these secure methods, are they worth the risk? Are they worth the fraud risk that they represent? And most customers, if they say, hey, here's another alternative to use, they'll use it, because ultimately, if somebody has a lot of money or the bank or whatever, they want to store these things securely, they're going to one of these organizations because they don't trust it being under their mattress. They're saying, hey, can you protect this? Tell me how to do it. They're looking to that company to tell them what to do. If that company says, oh, just use SMS, it's fine, they're going to do it. If they say, here's a YubiKey, I'm going to mail you one, they're more likely to do that. So we also have to put pressure on these companies, as those of us who are a little bit better educated, to help out those who aren't.
I guess that was another part of where are we going. There's things that we can individually do, but to protect ourselves. But the guy who was at stopsimcrime.org has left. Are there group things that we can do to make the carriers change their ways, or to get banks to use something other than SMS as a reset?
Okay, I think that's slowly happening, right? I mean, if you were, just to continue on the bank for a second, right? If you're a bank, typically how you think about this is what's the fraud risk, and it's more or less a financial argument, right? Is it more expensive to get my users a security key and then support the security key, or is it more expensive just to eat the losses? Right? Very often it comes down to that.
I would just add, and also the loss of adoption, right? You also run the risk that you offer a solution like this and your users say, no thanks, I'll go to Wells Fargo instead.
Very true, yeah. And what we're seeing is that at this point, for low-end retail banking, I see very few banks jumping into that yet. Right? Let's talk again in 3 years, but that's where we're today. At the high end, like the high net worth individuals, right? They were actually seeing relatively broad adoption of top banks, that they're starting handing out these devices and say, look, if you want to do business with us, right, you need to use a hardware token, right? And then we'll send a trainer if necessary, just because it's from a fraud risk perspective, it's worth it. If you look at today, funnily enough, it's no longer banks that have the most valuable assets that they're protecting, right? Often a large SaaS company has far more valuable assets in the data than a bank has in the money. Does that make sense? And if you look at the large SaaS companies, they're almost all using some form of security token at this point.
This actually happened to me twice, AT&T, blah, blah, blah. After my second one, I got a call from a New York City detective who was on a task force. And we had 2 calls where he interviewed me to explain what happened and what are my ideas. I had no ideas, of course, but you know, maybe you guys should help them out. Is there something going on with law enforcement to protect this?
Yeah, so Homeland Security started something called the React Task Force. The main office is actually in Northern California, out of Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. I wish it existed when I had my $24 million hack in January of 2018, which by the way was that large because I got hacked on the day of the altcoin moon. So that was the day that everything reached 800 million. I got hacked for 3 altcoins that are coins that I had, in 2 of 3 cases, I had done advisory and PR services for. So I had a whole bunch of those coins, which in the beginning were worth less than a penny, and at the altcoin moon, one of them had gone up to being worth $8, and the other one went up to being worth $48. And today, I think the one that went up to 48 is worth about $1, and the one that went up to about $7 or $8 is worth under 10 cents. But that was something that they were able to hack, turn into Bitcoin. There was enough demand for them to go and launder the entire $24 million through multiple accounts, primarily on Binance, that were opened up one day earlier, and they got KYC, full KYC for 100 Bitcoin a day in one day. And it's a non-US account, even though they serve US customers. And so I'm still trying to get more information from them. They said, well, we shared it with the Secret Service and the FBI. We don't have to share it for you, even though you have warrants. Even though you have a judgment, and even though you have, they're like, yeah, we don't respond to civil litigation. We just only respond to the government for criminal investigation. And so still continuing that battle. But there are things that if you want to be a good player in the industry, you should be cooperating with us, because they only even knew that those 5 accounts were there is because I called them and said, here are the 5 things that apparently took accounts from me. And there were only, for the larger asset, only 2 exchanges that had it. And I knew one of them personally. They were a US-based exchange, and I actually represented them for a while, and I Skyped the CEO, and he said, oh, geez, let me look. Nope, not ours. So that meant it was Binance. And then I had to go through people to get to the head of customer service, and they're like, yep, that's ours, we froze them. Most of the money was gone by then, and they have all the records of where it is, and the FBI has been sitting on it for about 18 months, because they move very slowly. If you have anything, you want to go to IC3.org, that's the Internet Crime Authority, and all these agents look and kind of like say, oh, I'm going to take it. But if you're in Northern California and it happens, the React Task Force out of Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department, Caleb Tuttle's the main guy. He's a badass. I mean,
They actually traced this to a retail shop on West 48th Street in Manhattan.
Right, so that's only part of it, right? That's the tip of the iceberg. That is the guy who got bribed. You then want to know, because you're able to go in, the information is there, and that's what React Task Force and the FBI and everybody can find out. The difference between React and the FBI is that the FBI, they like to go and round up everybody and then do turn on the TV cameras, we just arrested a gang of 12 people, and if it takes them 2 or 3 years, that's what it takes. Whereas with React, because they're a local group with Homeland Security backing, they're able to actually go to a local judge and say, hey, I have some information that we need a search warrant, and a local judge will give it to them. That's how they were able to bust Nicholas Truglia, who robbed $1 million from him and was part of the gang. It's alleged, but on his phone, he actually confesses to it to his dad. Hey, I'm rich now, the day of my hack, and also to his best friend, we're going to go and hire porn stars and go to the Super Bowl. That's actually, if you look at Krebs on security, he's got all the screenshots of that. It's part of the evidence. But they were able to go in And immediately, they would very quickly get a search warrant, and they went to New York City, which is where this guy was, because in his case, they had 6 different cases that all were AT&T stores all over the place, and they all said somebody walked into the store, and the towers tell the truth. The towers said, SIM got turned off here, should show up being lit up in the store in another phone. All of a sudden, it got lit up in the same block in New York City on 42nd Street where this guy is. And, you know, once, maybe twice a coincidence, 6, 7, 8, 10 times, it's the guy, right? And so that's why he's sitting in Santa Clara jail right now, and he's got his bail hearing next week, and we certainly think he's a flight risk, and we'll let people know that.
So can law enforcement actually do something?
Oh, they arrested this guy.
I mean, in the general solution, is there a?
Well, I mean, obviously, if more people acted like, well, first of all, if it happens to you, your best bet is, first of all, act quickly, right? So you want to, first of all, make sure that you call the telephone company and keep calling until somebody turns it off. Because as long as it's not turned off and returned to you, they can still keep on just fishing around. They can go and get your domain names changed. They can go and, you may not remember what 15 years ago you put a phone number on it. They know that, they can figure that out. So if you get it turned off, in my case, we got it turned off within 5 minutes, and it got turned back on again. So the guy, they bribed twice. And my wife is, smart enough to say, wait, it's supposed to be off, because we kept calling to make sure it was really off. And all of a sudden it turned on again. And
How did you know it got turned on?
because she called the number and it said, it's just like rang and it was going through. Yeah,
He's got you.
right.
Is that your wife now?
But no, and in that second period is when they took was when they were able to go and crack something. So in other words, they wanted more time. They said, "Oh, I think we're getting close here. Turn the thing back on." So that's where the ultimate solution in terms of this type of SIM swap is: don't let retail clerks get bribed. But if that happens to you, first and foremost, get it turned off. Get it returned to your phone, not just turned off, because I just had it frozen. I didn't have it.
What do you mean return?
Return to your number, right?
Yeah.
So I just had it frozen. I didn't have it returned to my number, because that sometimes takes extra action from them, like calling the fraud department and everything. This is a Sunday. Most of them happen on Sundays, or late at night if they're going through a call center.
First time I went through the calling and all the insanity. The second time, I'm like you said, I'm talking, and my phone's dead, and I know I have signal.
So you go on another phone, you make sure that you get it frozen, and then frozen, and then the other thing also to do within as fast as you can when the store is open, go in and say, I want to look at the logs.
That's what they did.
Because then you can see where it is.
Yep.
And then you ask also, I got a picture of the logs. They weren't happy about it, but I snapped the picture. The guy actually at AT&T the first time said, that's AT&T property. I said, call the police. You showed it to me in a public place. The second time, I didn't even take that chance. I just had my wife ask, and I'm in the back going, click, 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 click. And because then if you actually see the full log, you can see the actual IMEI, and you can track it, and you give that to the authorities, and they can just show where it got lit up. And then they will go to a local, if you're using Santa Clara, and you're all here in California, Northern California, they'll go get a warrant, and they'll bust the guy the next day. They've been very good at busting people. The FBI is not.
One quick thing I would add is I've been party to a few of these cases. People have it happen to them. I end up trying to help walk them through what to do. That also means every time somebody's phone service drops, they call me and say, what do I do, right? But in a few cases like this, oftentimes it's somebody remote controlling something in the U.S. And if the person that's actually doing this, or the group that's doing this, is outside the U.S. or within a country that doesn't extradite, I've talked to Secret Service. They'll often just say, sorry, in this situation, we have a lot of these. We're aware of keeping an eye on it. There's not much we can do about this case. So the thing that you can do is just move away from SMS services. I know for me, it's a really great feeling to know that if my number gets ported right now, the damage that you can do to me is very small. And it took a lot of work to set that up, but the personal security it gives me is worth it.
Well, Pimo gave me the hook, so we'll break now, and you guys can ask questions as long as these folks will stick around.
Thank you.